So good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us. As always, for question and answer, we will do our best to get Chris and Mark to answer them, but if you can direct all questions over to the chat, Sarah and I will then read them out and get them answered for you. If you guys have any feedback on what you want to see, please let us know so we can continue to deliver content that is most valuable to your business at this time. I think that's all. Oh, and sorry, and for social media, we're trying to get the community that we've built here to, sorry, to follow. Sorry, working from home. So if you can leave your social media handles in the chat as well, I'll share that out and we can all start following each other and supporting that way.
Thanks, Jenna. And I know from our side, I'll do a quick plug. We're looking to get to 1,000 followers on the HBEC channel. So if you can give us a follow, that'll help us get there sooner. We're excited about having 1,000 organic followers versus any other model. So this morning we're joined by Chris Adams, who many of you know, an HBEC mentor and the founder of Adams Hamilton. And we're also excited to bring to you today Mark Halprin from First CFO. So I'll turn over the mic to Mark and he can share what his background is and how he can bring his expertise to businesses in this area. We're excited to have Mark join us as a mentor at Henry Brunick Entrepreneurship Center. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you and thank you so much.
I think he's reconnecting to
oh, is he?
To audio here.
Okay.
And
Chris, do you want to talk about how cool you are?
Good morning, everybody. I see that there's a lot of, I got some B2B, there's some B2C people here and some professional services from our local community, which is great. Welcome. It's been great to work with Mark. Mark's based in Toronto, but he's been spending a lot more time up here in Barrie. And it's been really great to get to know his thinking. He's not your traditional accountant or bean counter, and I do say that in a great way. He's what I would describe as a curious accountant. So what that really is someone who's not just, plugging the numbers just to sort of see what your month end was and sort of discovering what the past was, but he's more of this guy that thinks about the future and future thinking of your business and running models. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today around running scenarios within your business and how this COVID could be affecting your business and how these models that Mark will talk about can help you understand the path forward. And I'll turn it over to Mark now that I see him active.
Yeah, now I'm calling in from my phone because my internet is, of course, goes down at 10 o'clock exactly. This is going to make for even a longer day, but yeah, I mean, I caught part of the intro and I've been helping small businesses largely in the tech industry in Toronto for the last 5 years, and very quietly kind of built out a small team to support me, help these small businesses, and it's somewhat intentional that I've never actually built on my URL, firstcfo.com. So one day I will come out of stealth mode, but in the meantime, it's intentional that I want to help companies kind of hands-on, personal approach, and be more useful than being, an outsourced bookkeeping firm or a firm that wants to just, have many clients and spread themselves thin. So we built up some good relationships over the years, and I think
All right. It's always great when we still have, it's to the year 2020, we're still having technical difficulties. All good, Mark.
Okay.
We can hear you again.
You can hear me again? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Where do we want to to begin. I don't know where I got cut off there, but if you can hear me, we can jump in.
Did you want to start just with some scenario, like thinking, like we talked last week on Wednesday, and we were talking just around creating scenarios. So everybody on the call here today is probably thinking, okay, what's my best case scenario here? What's my worst case scenario here? How do I think about planning those scenarios out?
Right. And I think we had talked a little bit about, where can you focus your attention right now?
Yeah.
And where's,
Yeah.
Obviously you want to focus, you have limited bandwidth, especially if you're unfortunately one of the companies that had to lay a number of people off, or you've, had to temporarily shut down. You may have limited resources right now. You certainly may have limited cash. But where can you focus your attention with the least amount of friction? And we had talked about, is that building the pipeline, which a lot of companies I think are forgetting to do right now. I think they're spending a lot of time, not really getting the sales and marketing machine going again, because they're hiding, or they're under a rock, or they're in a doomsday scenario. And so the slide that we've talked about, Chris has just put up, is kind of an interesting way to look at the sales funnel. And if you flip it on its side and you turn it into a bow tie like this, traditionally Chris is really focused on the red funnel, which is client acquisition, building the top of funnel, pushing them through to closing a deal, which is in the middle of the funnel. And I'm typically focused on the green, which is then growing your customer base, turning that into revenue, growing the dollars from current customers and expanding them. I would argue that where those red arrows are, we're seeing the most pain right now. We're not seeing customers convert, and we're not seeing customers that have recently converted do much more than just the bare minimum with, the new relationship. If it's a services business, they're just, doing whatever little amount they can. If it's a product business, they're maybe buying the minimums because they haven't built up that trust and relationship. So, I think the argument is we can add a lot of value in both of the ends of the funnel right now. We can attract great new opportunities that may not close for a while, but at least they are aware of us and they're interested in what we're selling. And I think there's a real opportunity to grow our best customers by giving them, incentivizing them, giving them rewards, staying in touch with them, and they'll continue to be long lasting, valuable customers to us after this is all done. And I think there's this least amount of friction in those two areas right now. I don't know, Chris, if you kind of agree, or you've been seeing kind of that dynamic happening currently.
Absolutely. And if you have, and again, at this point in time, if you're thinking about limiting spending at this particular point, focusing in on people that may have already engaged your brand, so they might already be following you. You might not be spending money on attracting new followers, but right now you might be trying to talk about things to your current followers that are listening, that are close to taking an action. And how do you, I guess, remove the friction to take action? There was an example of a company that we were just working with over the last week at HBEC Brawberry. It's a local retail store that's based in Barrie and also in Collingwood. They just got online as of last week and started doing some sales, amazingly enough. So part of their friction obviously was they didn't have a retail store online. That was hard. The second part to that too was shipping. So again, another layer of friction would be, even if I did buy something, I would had to have waited, or found a time or to pick up my bag outside their door of their shop. That could be friction. So they introduced a local shipping option, which would allow that to happen again. The other part to this story too is another layer of friction they uncovered was, people want to talk about their purchase. And typically the phone isn't the right way of doing it. So Zoom has been introduced. So they went from, again, no retail online to retail online to offering shipping and now offering sales calls via Zoom. So that's one kind of B2C sort of story. Within 2 weeks, they've adapted to this funnel right here where they took action in their, now they're going to go after their current retention, the green area here on the slide. They're going to go after their current clientele by offering them boutique Zoom meetings and get-togethers online. So they're kind of coming back to their brand. And when you think about that, that's pretty cool because now their brand can be extended. They used to have women that would show up in the store and they would get together to purchase clothing, but now they can actually extend that and host Zoom parties and talk about, things about life. So it's extending their brand and potentially offering them discounts into their store at the same time. So that's one change and one story from 1 week. So the talk today too is, what is going to be your new normal? And in that story too is, when I look at that, I don't think Strawberry would change in the future. So if things were to become, let's say, normal again tomorrow, and you could actually go to a store and buy something, would Strawberry turn their store off? Would they stop offering shipping? Would they not offer sort of an ability to have Zoom meetings for, let's say, women that might not be able to make it to their store, some elderly or people that are outside their zone that don't want to drive a half an hour or an hour? I'm thinking that the new normal for them is their new course of business. So I want today's topic too is around, what you're doing today and what digital transformation you're incorporating into your business. I think you will be setting the path of your new normal in your business and how you're communicating and how you're conducting your business online. And I'll turn it back over to Mark.
Yeah, I think, that's a good point. I mean, how do you now engage with your customers in kind of a different world now? And, I think we've talked in the past about what does it look like if a customer now wants to have a discount, or how do you incentivize them? How do you keep your current customers extra happy? I think I see a lot of subscription businesses where people have been locked in, on a month-to-month contract, especially most common in software SaaS businesses. And, I see people asking for discounts just because they can, and everyone knows that, that, hey, I can go call my insurance company too and get a discount, or my landlord and try to get a discount, or a delay in payment for COVID. So why not offer some of these but make sure if it means you're going to get something on the back end. And I think that, if you're going to be loyal, if you're going to show that you're going to help your customers, and you're going to be loyal to them, they should be loyal to you, and try to get, maybe it's an annual extension to their contract. Maybe it's, getting them to agree to an upsell in the future, a change in price later on, for a discount now. So there's lots of strategies we can probably think about that could have a longer term financial impact, rather than just simply, giving away, free perks or free shipping or whatever it is. Make sure that these customers are going to also be with you for the long run.
Agreed. I put another slide up that we talked about last week, and we were discussing, how founders would be looking at potentially changing their products and services. And, my input on it was absolutely people are going to, or entrepreneurs are going to reassess what they're offering. And I think from my standpoint, I'm always kind of pinpointing on this. Are you selling a vitamin, like a Flintstone vitamin, or are you selling an aspirin in a time of need? And obviously it's always easier to sell aspirins because people want to solve pain immediately in their business, versus vitamins are a harder sell because you can always get by without having your Flintstone vitamin every day. So How are we as marketers within our businesses trying to really pinpoint the essence of the value chain and what you're offering in terms of your service or your product? And how can you adjust either the marketing or how can you focus in on the products that ultimately matter to your clientele? If we were looking at that funnel again, what's appealing that's going to activate those new clients or activate current clients in buying more from you at this point in time? And everybody probably offers a multitude of things, but again, look at what your business is offering and try to figure out in terms of the marketing and or looking at what exactly, why do people buy from me continuously, and hone in on that messaging. Really own that piece right now. Mark?
Right. I think it's the value piece is really what you're trying to sell right now, right? Like if you've got something that's highly valuable to certain customers, and you can identify what that value proposition is, and you've got those customers already liking you, keep focusing on that. Keep focusing on products A and B that are your top. If it's experimental product E, you may not focus on it right now. It's just too much of a use of energy, and it may not pan out into anything. So deliver what you believe is your top value, and that's another way to bring in all those new customers too, right? Get the attention of somebody who's never tried your product by saying, look at this value I'm currently delivering to the market, and all these people are currently subscribing to my product and love product A and B. And so I think there's going to be a lot of kind of refinement of what people are selling to say, what are my top SKUs here? What are my top value proposition? And let's focus on that for the short run, just to keep the pipeline getting filled at the top.
I agree. I'm going to share another slide that we discussed last week too, which is, let's see here. I think
I specifically sent this one to you because of item number 2. And it's been killing me that all these companies, especially in the tech space that I work with, the first thing they're doing is turning off their marketing engine. They're laying off their sales team, and they're wiping out like their customer success, which is really their like almost like customer support and the people who really push the value proposition for the software. No different than any other industry, right? You have champions, I guess, of the product that you need to keep getting your message continuously sent out that we are the best and we offer the best solution for you. But to kill all those people and just stick with your development team or your your core operating team, I think is a bit short-sighted. And it's kind of, when I saw this, I said, like that's one mistake I think on here. I mean, office expenses, sure, you can cut your office expenses because you're not in your office. But I think a lot of these other lines, especially around marketing or even contractors, like, if they're contractors that were helping you sell or helping you, be in the market, that's also probably a bad decision there.
Absolutely. And this is, I think this is a fun subject anyway, in general, because I think that in every office, we've always had a traditional, when the marketing guy, there's always probably a joke somewhere out there if a marketing guy and a finance guy enter a boardroom, what happens next? It's always a fun subject in general during either crisis times or not crisis times. There's always going to be the yin and yang of, hey, let's not spend too much, and hey, let's spend because we need to. I'm still like, even in a downturn, I'm still a big proponent on branding. I'm not really ever have been a big proponent on spray and pray, which is typically what some people or some agencies might want to do, where you take a whole bunch of keywords and they say, hey, spend lots of money in Google and we'll drive traffic to your website. But at the end of the day, you know, are they really just driving traffic to your site, or are they the right traffic going to your site? And I think that's always the trick at this. There's a lot of when I look at some of the faces here today too, there's a lot of, you know, traditional sort of ways of getting leads, which is, you know, either in our local community, going to like a Barrie Chamber of Commerce sort of trade show, and there's some other B2B people on here that might be flying around the world to get leads at certain trade shows. They might be targeting people in the States or in Europe or even in Ontario here. But when we think about that, even if the law said, you know, you can go back to normal and go to work tomorrow, you know, are you really getting on a flight to New York City tomorrow to travel to do a trade show and meet 2,000 or 3,000 people and then come home to your family? I don't think that that's going to happen right away. You know, it probably would happen maybe over a couple of years as trust sort of is built up in the public health system, and trust that everything's going to be fine again. So I think that the big decisions are going to be, if you were to cut a lot right now, are you creating a black hole of sales leads 6 months out? So for example, we're in this COVID crisis right now, but if you were cutting sales and marketing at this point in time, are you actually creating a secondary problem in your organization a few months from now is the key question. So if you were going quiet, getting into a bunker, this might have a direct impact on if business is back to normal again tomorrow, are you now going to be a few months behind the rest of everybody that has also still continued to spend and have their sales team reach out to people and lightly build that sales funnel over time? They might not be buying today, but they may be looking at buying into the fall. So we also don't want to miss out in creating a black hole in our organizations. And Mark, do you want to talk to that about that?
Yeah, I've seen it also from the financing side. You know, if you are a company that thinks you're going to need to raise some capital in later this year, and most companies probably only had, you know, a year's worth of runway or even less, you know, for some of the companies that, you know, are early stage and burning a fair bit of cash to get off the ground. You know, if you're turning everything off and you're hoping that, you know, you're going to be able to just turn it all back on and get out into the market and attract some VCs or potential investors later this year, that's going to be really tough because, you know, I think if you don't have that top of funnel, you don't have the pipeline being built because you've gone dark for 4 months. Why is an investor going to be really thrilled about throwing new money into you? And I've talked to venture capitalists, you know, about a week or two ago when things were a little more dire maybe than they are now, and they were like, well, the problem is that the investors that fund them have options to put money in the stock market and make decent returns right now. So why put money into a high risk early stage company? And it makes sense. I mean, the risk reward profiles changed a fair bit. So if you're not showing that you're now, you know, in the top half or top quarter of the companies they could potentially invest in, it's going to be that much harder to attract that capital later this year. So I think, you know, if the best thing you can do is either show growth in top of funnel or show that your current customers are willing to expand and buy more from you because they like you and you know, they think that there's a long-term solution for them staying with you. So, you know, this slide here showing, you know, what VCs are looking at, I mean, they're taking a view that, you know, it's end of this year, even later, even next year, before things are kind of returning back to normal and the cash is flowing again, chasing all these government subsidies and tax incentives. And we talked about whether or not this call would focus on that, and I really didn't want it to, because I think, yeah, that's great. It's helping companies immediately keep the lights on, but it's not really long-term a long-term focus, and even the $40,000 loan that you can get very easily through your bank right now eventually has to be repaid. So, it's short-term fixes, but I think the real value is going to come from, focusing on what's going to grow your business come the summer and come the fall, to attract real new equity investment.
Yeah, this is, I mean, like even beyond the VC, I like this slide a lot just because when I see it, I'm also looking at it from the perspective of, getting back to normal. And even if we were all kind of, let's say, Canada Day or before, we're, the first wave or whatever that definition might be, hey, go back and you can open up your business, all as well. It's going to take time to restart things. In B2C, you're obviously looking from a perspective of what's the buying power of my customers right now? Have they lost their jobs? And does my product or service matter to them at this point in time? Is it needed today or tomorrow? So I think you got to retool and rethink in that manner. For B2B, you're looking at, even if I was to fire up the factory tomorrow, do I have I might have some backlog of orders, but potentially speaking, there might be a gap between that and new orders coming in. So as the factory sort of restarts, I can see this kind of moving into the fall and then really getting back to the new normal, which would be by spring of next year. As we move forward.
We talked a bit too about, not to be overly negative, but some companies that are struggling pretty badly, now's an opportunity to say, what am I really doing? What am I really selling? And does it even make sense anymore? Or is there even the demand I thought there was? Right? And do you stop for a period of time and reevaluate and come back again in the fall with kind of a new solution or new offering?
Yes.
We haven't had a kind of a shutdown or a downturn like this, in 12 years or so, or 11 years. And, people kind of have got by with a lot of help from money that's been just floating around and available. I think a lot of those companies that have just skated by for many years probably need to think, like, why have I struggled for these many years, and am I doing the right things?
Very true. And I mean, there's different ways of looking at what's happening right now. There's opportunity, even though there's, it's not great, but there is opportunity to rethink what's happening, the business process, what you're doing internally in your organization. And the decisions that you decide to make today will better amplify, let's say, or better prepare you afterwards. So take the time to reevaluate, what you're doing as an organization, how you're selling, your business process, everything that's available to you, and what better time right now to do change management within an organization and with your employees than now, because they're listening, they're part of the solution. They want to be part of the solution. They're not going to hold back and say it's status quo or take longer than normal to adopt a new technology. I think within this digital transformation, you're seeing, even in the smallest organization to one of the larger organizations that's on this call today, I think great things can happen in short period of time. I mean, I was laughing about our talk when we went over our conversation about this today last week, and I said that's been one internet year. I don't remember our conversation from a week ago. And it's absolutely true. I think in today's world, 1 week of change literally is 1 year of adaptation out there.
It's true. And, I think you can never really prepare for this, and time seems to be moving really slowly, and companies are moving really slowly too, and as far as decision making and all that goes. But when I think back to, and this is like going way back to the beginning of my career, if you go back to Y2K, people had plans in place and detailed plans in place for what happens if computers stop working back then. Since then, there's really not been anything to really, except for the banks and except for financial services industries that got burned in 08 and 09. They came out with detailed plans in 2010, 11, 12. What if this happens again? What are we going to do? And there's been lots of legislation governments put in place to force them to have plans. But really, it's probably been since Y2K where the general population has had to plan for a business shutdown. So now 20 years later, now's a good time, like you said, to have that kind of foresight and say, what is our plan, and what is, if this happens again, if we have a COVID, return, unfortunately, that could happen, and we're in shutdown again, what do we do? And what's our process, and what does it look like even from our team's perspective? Who do we keep? What's our sales focus and our go-to-market approach?
Agreed.
I don't know if you've seen companies you've worked with even have some sort of disaster recovery plan. I haven't seen it, for most of the companies I work with. There's really been no thinking of anything could go wrong.
No, typically that's, yeah. I mean, there probably is a little bit of sort of like what happens if someone was to die, or what happens if someone was to be removed, but no one's really been thinking about like sort of a supply chain kind of disaster and what would happen. I don't think any retailer on this call ever thought of like what happens when someone mandates that I can't even open my door and sell them something. And if I would have known that, would I have figured out how to implement Shopify like a year ago? And so, I mean, on the call today for the retailers, I'm sure Sarah can back me up on this, but for the last few years at the Henry Bernick Center, I've been, and I see Sizzle Sauce on the call here too. I've been pushing them as well on going online and trying to get your 80% of your revenue coming off off the website, or B2B transactions off the website, versus 20% in retail. Versus what I was seeing when meeting with people was typically 1 to 5% on the website, and the rest of it in store at retail. And I'm hoping from this crisis that we all learn from this, and we really start to figure out that retail does need to change, and we still can't have really great experiences within our stores, yet we can deliver value via the web, and that could be through shipping. It could be through expanded, being able to expand my offerings, but not have that clothing or have that in my actual store as inventory, but being able to potentially drop ship it from my distributor. I mean, very innovative ways to do things with less cash flow and more innovation.
Right. Speaking of that, I think you had a slide, didn't you, with the cash flow reserves that you would probably need, in a typical business. Do you have that one handy?
Is that the one I was showing last week too, or?
Yeah, we were talking about, under certain scenarios, how much reserve do you need? And I know it varies business to business. But realistically, I know in the world of tech anyway, we always talk about wanting to have at least a year, and usually, you'll be capitalized to have 18 months worth of cash. And if you're thinking about a longer term plan, doing things like not holding as much inventory, it's one way to make available a lot more cash reserves. And there's probably other ways to remain lean and extend that runway. So if in the worst case scenario you're shut down for months, you can weather that storm. And I think that's this one here. Some of the scenarios for worst case scenarios, being inside your control or outside your control. I mean, this is obviously kind of an outside of your control scenario we're in, but we can we can have plans in our control to address that, right? And so, kind of the yellow being, at least have a year's worth of cash available to be able to weather a storm. In this example, it's, plan C, cut 25% of your operating costs so that you could weather scenario C, which is, a very long lockdown. I mean, lockdown might just be a slowdown in business or a long recession. So this is just an example of kind of, every business would be different, but here's, an example of how you might come up with a couple plans to then, say, in these types of economic scenarios, I know I can make it with X amount of dollars. And that's when you look into, like you're saying, a lot of these strategies around, around inventory or around the way you interact with your supply chain and negotiate deals, and maybe it's setting up new contracts that allow flexibility in pricing and orders and order volumes. There's probably lots of ways that you can enact an emergency plan if needed to preserve your cash flow through a recession.
Absolutely, and with that, I'll do a small plug for you. You can reach out through Sarah to get some time with Mark. And this image right here doesn't have to be as sophisticated as it looks. It's more about looking at your specific, and everything is under non-disclosure, obviously, with Georgian College and the mentors, and having Mark's time to take a peek at, your cash flow situation and scenarios, and looking at this from an inventory perspective, like all different angles. So Mark is a new mentor at the college, and we look forward to having him. And I do, again, love curiosity in looking at these things in the future perspective. Obviously, we always need, someone to do our accounting, and we need our bookkeepers, and I love them as well too. But I really do respect people that can kind of foreshadow and do the insights into the future and really work with the entrepreneur to figure out, to eliminate fear. What is the best case scenario in my business at this point in time, and what's my worst case scenario? And if I can really know what my worst case scenario is, do I have that leap of faith to spend money on marketing and sales to achieve those results and go between the worst and the best? And I think that's, that helping point is to understand the finance portion of that decision making. And I think a lot of us take leaps of faith without knowing our finances. But I think at this point in time, finance has become critically important in our lives as business owners. And so please reach out, and you can book time via Sarah and Don, and reach out to Mark.
I should hire you as my sales and marketing guy. That's the best pitch yet. But yeah, I think we do help on the bookkeeping side, but I always tell people the bookkeeping piece is what we enjoy doing, only because it leads us to the strategic part. And if we understand your finances, because we're the ones involved in your finances, then we can actually, come up with these plans and strategies and do some higher level thinking, with you as to what does this, growth trajectory look like? And if it doesn't pan out that way, then what, right? Like all the then what scenarios is often, not what people do, because they create one budget and they say, oh, I got my budget done. And, they just try to track against it. But of course, nobody ever matches their budget perfectly unless you do your budget after the fact, which some people do as well. But that only makes you feel good. It doesn't solve any problems. So I appreciate the kind words there. And I hope to help more companies kind of get through this ideally, and we'll get, out of this in the fall and start growing businesses again.
Absolutely. We have a question on the side here about launching a brand during this uncertain time, and I can start to answer that question. back in late 2008 and early 2009, I was sort of dumb enough to start a company after the stock market crash. And I started with my co-founder, started G-Shift in the midst of the carnage of that market crash. And I thought when I look back at it, I don't think I would have picked any other time to start a company. I think starting a company and doing it now while everybody else is, let's say, under siege, you have this opportunity to thrive and test and really get to know people if you want to take some chances. And I think that's how I felt back then. And in terms of employees, people really wanted to find there was a different. Before 2008, people were really working for money, and then after 2008, people really started having these more, hey, I want to not only work, but I also want to feel like I'm making change. I want to work with something that's just innovative and driving. So I think the message is, if you're going to start something and you're going to be a brand right now, make sure that you really know your mission and your vision, and you have passion and really get to the essence of what you're trying to do to attract those people at this time where you might be having to offer them a little bit less than the normal market rates to work for you because of cash flow, and really try to get them to commit during this time and help build your organization. In terms of the brand portion of it, definitely there's going to be challenges with budgetary to reach your fans or get followers, but there are ways to either utilize influencers, people that might retweet or share your content on whatever platform you might be on, such as Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn. And I think don't be scared at approaching, like-minded businesses to do co-marketing. So I know, like on this call, like Georgian Chocolate and a few other organizations, Shiny's on this call as well. They might be thinking of, hey, like you got to give your mother something sometime soon in May. So, why not get together and bring a couple of brands together for that Mother's Day? And if you were to do co-marketing together, you expand all of your brands together. And so when I look out on the call here, just think about, if you're a food-based company such as Sizzle, what else could be cool for Mother's Day and barbecuing? And again, Father's Day is coming up in the following month. And, what other things could be kind of brought together as a Mother or Father's Day package and trying to create a co-marketing event or a sale? So those are some things to think about. Mark, do you have a couple of points on that?
Well, I think the brands, all the brands are fighting right now it's getting the COVID message out, and we're with you, and we're supporting the frontline people, or we're supporting the community. And I think there's tons of activity in branding right now because people really want to elevate their brand given the current situation. And some people have different views of whether that's just taking advantage of a bad situation, but nonetheless, if people are, at least people are still focused on their brand is what I'm trying to say. And I think there's not a time to kind of say, well, we're going to hide and we'll refocus on our messaging, when this is all over. Come up with some creative ways to re-engage with your customers or with potential customers, because people are listening. People are just listening through different means right now. It's not the trade show anymore, so it's not face to face, but there's still a message to get out there.
I like it. One last, I know that Jenna's popping back on because there's 10 minutes to go, and she's going to talk to us about all the next awesome coffee talks that are coming up. But one last message. I know there's some B2B people, but your bank right now, and potentially, I know Steve Loftus is on the call, and we had the opportunity to do this this TAP program, a trade accelerator program at the Sandbox earlier this year, which was fantastic. And I learned a lot about Export Development Bank of Canada, which I thought was great. And the understanding of insuring product going across the border. And also one major thing that has never left my mind, I still have not been able to implement it yet, but the concept of trade relations and or supply chain, the trust in that space could be lowered during this time, and therefore people may want cash up front for deals. Whereas if you were to look at the Export Development Bank of Canada and you were to insure your purchase order, it is possible working with your bank and the EDC. And maybe this is a subject matter for some more B2B like clients of ours in the future. But there is a way to still offer, 30, 60, 90-day terms, but having the right insurance with your bank and having the cash up front would allow potentially you to thrive during these times where your competitors want cash up front, but you're offering 90-day terms. And that's a fantastic frictionless feature of your organization. And I'm going to spend some more time learning about that subject. And Mark, do you have comments on fun times with banks and offerings?
Well, I mean, there's lots of discussion about offerings. I think that's a great one. Anything you can do to have that competitive edge like that is a great program. And I think, BDC also wants to have a lot of programs to help small businesses. I think they're just overwhelmed right now. And I think no different than the government programs. Some of them they've been talking about for a month now and have yet to be fully rolled out. I think there will be some good programs coming, some good ways, some good things to go after in the next couple of months. And you should definitely learn about them and try to take advantage of them. But ultimately, like the fundamentals of your business is what needs to be strong too. These solutions, some of them are good long-term solutions and great, like absolutely, maybe focus on the long-term solutions. I think the Band-Aid ones are good if you're desperate, and just weigh the effort to the long-term benefit. If you could go out and spend 20 hours drumming up some new top of funnel business rather than 20 hours to apply for a government grant program, what's going to reward you in the long term? It's kind of my opinion on that.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I know I think Jenna has a question.
Yeah, I had a question about, so people like Sizzle Sauce and then myself for Georgian Chocolate, like a big thing that we were going to push this year was retail sales. So what are your suggestions to businesses like ours that we would like to get into a storefront? Should we still be actively, and assuming that storefront is closed at this point? So is it smart to, continue with those marketing efforts and continue those sales? Sorry.
I can start, Mark, if you like.
Sure.
If you are, I would say don't stop with your online kind of marketing to purchase your product right now in the most effective way possible in developing that. If you were to start, I have great thoughts, for you because you're such a friend to the artists. And that warms my heart because I love art too. So if you were to start maybe having, webinars like on Zoom here, where you have an artist talk from one of your chocolate bars and you can, host it, and then kind of like the artist gets to talk about their portfolio, but you're just doing that for free. You're extending your brand. You're talking about art. You're talking about why, they chose to put their piece of artwork on your chocolate bar. Just so happens that if you do attend, that you might get a discount on your store. And then once your store is open in Severn, you know, what would happen to have, you know, great food from like sizzle sauce and, you know, Bart's garlic stuff and things, and cheese and crackers, and having that on a Friday night and having an artist talk within your store in the future, where that artist has a small selection of new paintings that they've just done in a collection, and you become really the studio for them to launch their art. And you're also bringing in some local product together and creating a great experience inside your you can still do the Zoom meetings as well for people that are outside of the area that can't come. And I think there's some brand extension between your chocolate bar, the artists having Zoom calls online, and also creating that new experiential shop.
Right. Yeah, I think there's, you know, you have to say, having the shop, you know, what does that do for both my brand and for my potential growth, right? So if you know, if you can only get 60% or 50% of the way there online, but you still need the physical presence to get the other rest of the way to achieve your goals, but be it both cash flow, revenue, and even just, you know, personal goals of where you want your business to get to, then you still need the shop. You know, as a finance guy, I'd probably be saying, oh, well, how can we do this now economically? Because, you know, maybe the landlord for the space is, you know, is feeling a bit under pressure, a bit squeezed, and you can negotiate a lot better for that space. Or maybe there's ways that you can operate that space a lot more effectively, you know, given the current environment, the current economy. You know, there's probably, you'd have to kind of look at all the different angles you could play to reopen a physical space, but maybe now you're in more control, given the, you know, if we are in a recession and things are going to be tough for the first, you know, 6, 7, 8 months, but, you know, you're in great shape when we pull out of that in the near future.
Okay, awesome. And then in terms of, because we, along with opening our retail, we want to continue to wholesale out to other retail shops. So is that something that we can still actively do? Hit on mute and they go great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't see why the wholesale option falls away right now. You know, of course, the buyer has to be willing to, you know, enter into new contracts right now, and is not going to beat you up on price. So, you know, there is going to be a little tougher negotiation probably than you would have had 2 months ago. But I think you should, of course, still pursue it, and then, you know, look at it financially, and does it make sense, even if they want a bit of a discount, because they can ask for it, because maybe they're in more control than they used to be. You know, can you still make enough margin to make it worth it?
This might be the best opportunity right here, Mark, again for you for another plug. But you know, this exercise of you know, making a margin from wholesaling and understanding your cost of goods. I mean, again, I've done this with Sizzle a number of times. But you know, when you look at these things and you want to say, hey, I want to offer my product on Amazon, but then you actually look at what Amazon's taking, and then you look at like the free shipping that's involved with it, and you go, oh my God, you know, my margins are basically the same as my wholesale margin if I was to sell that same widget or product to another store for them to sell and for them to make their retail margin on it. As long as you know your pricing, you can feel comfortable with it, Jenna, and know that you are still making that margin from a wholesale perspective. I would say wholesaling is a great way to grow your organization, and I would say definitely invest in wholesaling in the future.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you. I know we only have 2 minutes left on this call, and I know people have to get on with their weeks, but I just wanted to thank both you, Mark.
We've lost her.
I'll continue on, but yes, thank you, Mark, for your time, and Chris. It was valuable to have you on, and hopefully we can get you guys together again in the future and continue this talk on. But yeah, if everyone can share their social media handles in the chat, websites. Sorry, Sarah, we lost you.
Awesome. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, I hope that it didn't freeze in a weird way on my face. So we have, I wanted to give a shout out to a local entrepreneur that we work with, Sven Hansen. He started Hometown Brawn, which is a podcast and a company. So if you're interested in checking out a company that's doing something really innovative during this time, Sven's launched this great podcast. It's funny, it's real, and he's interviewing locals. So very pertinent to what's happening here in Central Ontario. So check out Hometown Brawn. In addition to that, Sven's going to be joining us next week to talk about streamlining your business during lockdown. So how you can start to transition some of your operations to less costly apps and start to do some more automation. So he's going to share what he's done with his business. So more of a peer-to-peer sharing opportunity where, oh, you okay? Where he's going to actually share exactly how he took things back down in cost-wise. Next Monday on Coffee Talks, we have Amanda Sutton, who's the founder of Catalyst Choreography Communications. She's an expert in PR and media. And so on that marketing side, I think she's going to share some really insightful tips around the topic of pivot, don't panic. And so really excited to have Amanda join us as both an HVAC mentor and on Coffee Talks next Monday. And I will be excited to announce that we're launching an e-commerce accelerator program. So this is a 5-week opportunity for businesses that have e-commerce integrated into their website to learn how to really take that to the next level and scale it out even global. And so this e-commerce accelerator will be run by Alex Brown. It's $99 for a 5-week program. It includes self-guided learning, one-on-one mentorship, and group meetups every single week. So there will be an application process for that, but we'll share it out with you. Thank you to everyone that shared their social media in the chat. If you are interested, follow us at GCHBEC. And I hope that you have a really great week, and I hope that I see you next Monday. And yeah, enjoy the sun today, I hope. Take care, and nice to see you all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.